Welcome to the Quick Tips and Resources. This module is on progress monitoring versus grading. Contained in this live binder, you will find other resources for progress monitoring and grading. This session is not intended to be a detailed training on progress monitoring, but will simply help listeners distinguish between progress monitoring and grading. Let's begin. Grading in education is the process of applying standardized measurements of varying levels of achievement in a course. Grading generally means students are assessed on how well they have mastered grade level requirements. The assigning of a grade indicates the relative quality of the student's work, such as how many problems a student got correct on a math test. The Office of Special Education Programs National Center on Student Progress Monitoring defines progress monitoring as a scientifically based practice that teachers can use to evaluate the effectiveness of their instruction for individual students or their entire class. Teachers identify goals for what their students will learn over time, measure their students' progress toward meeting these goals by comparing expected and actual rates of learning, and adjust their teaching methods as needed. The Texas Education Code states school districts must have policies in place regarding grading. As you can read, grades should be based on relative mastery of an assignment and quality of the student's work. With regard to special education students, the ARD committee determines in the student's IEP the mastery level, the content the student is responsible for, accommodations, and any modifications to the course content. Guskey, in his 2006 article, Making High School Grades Meaningful, highlights 3 areas grades are usually derived from. Product criteria addresses what students know and are able to do at a particular point in time. They relate to the student's specific achievements or level of proficiency as demonstrated by final examinations, final reports, projects, exhibits, or portfolios. Process criteria relate to the student's behaviors in reaching their current level of achievement and proficiency. They include elements such as effort, behavior, class participation, punctuality in turning in assignments, and work habits. They also might include evidence from daily work, regular classroom quizzes, and homework. Progress criteria consider how much students improve or gain from their learning experiences. These criteria focus on how far students have advanced rather than where they are. Grading systems are also driven by district policy, content area, as well as individual teacher preference. Some of these areas used to obtain grades have little to do with an individual student's academic progress. For instance, how much help did the student have on the homework? Was the daily work completed with a peer buddy? A student who is a full year behind his peers in reading may be well behaved, participate in class, turn in assignments on time, and display exceptional effort, but how much real academic progress did he make in the content area? This student might actually receive a modified grade, which means they are not on grade level. A student can even pass a final exam, but the question remains, what measurable progress did they make in the subject area? Guskey states in his article, Grading Exceptional Learners, effective grading and reporting systems must be based on clearly articulated standards for student learning. This changes the meaning of a grade from a single overall assessment of learning, how did the student perform in language arts, to a description of the student's performance on an explicit set of skills. How well did the student master the ability to identify the plot, setting, and characters in a reading passage? Young and Guskey state, we move from measures that are often subjective in nature to to more objective, data-driven measures. Looking back at the definition of progress monitoring, we see it starts with baseline data, has clear objective goals defined, uses regular objective assessment to determine actual progress toward the goal, and as a result of this assessment, teaching methods and interventions are adjusted. As educators, you are familiar with the term curriculum-based assessment. CBA meets the definition of progress monitoring. In each academic area, probes are developed, such as brief reading passages, short spelling lists, samples of math items from the curriculum, and these probes are used to collect data on student performance. These probes are developed from materials that make up the child's curriculum. CBA provides a structured way to see how well a child performs on the materials the student and the teachers is assigning in class. In CBA, teachers identify the skills in the year-long curriculum, determine the relative weight of the skills for instruction, create alternative test or assessment forms, give assessments regularly, graph and analyze data, modify instruction as needed. Many of you may have used unit assessments in your curriculum as a means of progress monitoring. Other means of progress monitoring are norm-referenced and/or criterion-referenced assessments. Those familiar with behavior intervention plans will notice that data taken on behavior is also progress monitoring. This list is not meant to be exhaustive, but just to give a few examples. Resources for more information on progress monitoring are given in the live binder. Grades are not an adequate measure of progress on IEP goals and objectives. As we have previously discussed, a student may be passing but still be 2 years behind peers in a subject. It is the progress monitoring on IEP goals that will help determine actual student progress toward the goal. On all IEP goals, progress must be reported at least as often as the student receives a report card. In the example above, this campus uses 2 types of progress monitoring tools to track actual gains in reading skills for a student. Again, while the student will also be receiving a class grade, the grade in and of itself may not track actual reading progress. In summary, in education we have grades. Grades are one measure of achievement and can be based on subjective as well as objective data. But grades in and of themselves do not necessarily explain the actual progress of a student in a given subject area. Progress monitoring is a scientifically based practice that teachers can use to evaluate the effectiveness of their instruction for individual students or their entire class. Teachers identify goals for what their students will learn over time, measure their students' progress toward meeting these goals by comparing expected and actual rates of learning, and adjust their teaching as needed. Please contact me if you have questions or comments. We want to make this training as useful as possible for participants. Thank you for joining us today for this quick tip, and be sure to check out the live binder for resources on progress monitoring and grading. Thank you.